This is a box of bits. We have a lot to talk about here, so let's get on with it. This video is sponsored by PCBWay, more on that later on. The Prusa Mark IV-S is the Mark IV upgraded with the letter of the alphabet we absolutely could have predicted would be released if we'd spent more than 2 minutes thinking about the potential upgrades for the Mark IV printer. That sentence made sense when I wrote it. The only question I had when I first heard of the Mark IV-S was, well, what is there to upgrade? I'm sure that's the same question a lot of you had. Luckily we have a list of these things and we'll go through it in a minute, but the biggest one is the cooling. At least I assume so. It certainly is the biggest thing on the front of the hot end anyway. I wanted to show you at least some idea of what's involved in upgrading the Mark IV you bought last month to a Mark IV-S, because I think that's more valuable than just reviewing a Mark IV-S and hand-waving over the differences and letting you decide whether you want to upgrade. But at the same time, I don't want this to be a 4-hour build stream, so we'll see how it turns out. I did annoy some of you by deleting the build footage in the MMU video previously, so we'll try to get a better balance this time without making it too boring. What I want to ascertain ideally is how much effort this upgrade is and whether it's worth it. In the box we have a relatively low number of parts and the world's smallest bag of Haribos. I'm not sure this is commensurate with the amount of work expected, so some rationing might have to occur. Importantly, there's a sticker in a bag of its own, a manual that isn't an upgrade guide, and a box with the rest of the parts. Still not that many, which really explains the low cost of the kit overall. The guide itself is online and breaks down the sections appropriately into the different upgrades the kit comes with. The Y-axis comes first and it's pretty simple. Removing the parts that hold the belt and replacing them with the identical looking ones might seem a bit pointless, but these parts have been slightly modified and they're now made of PCCF, which is carbon fibre polycarbonate. This is one of the overarching themes of the upgrade, replacing PETG parts with parts that can withstand presumably an enclosure. Now you might complain that this should be something separate that Prusa does for anyone who buys an enclosure. I realise that the number of people who run a Prusa in an enclosure is a subset. I'm not going to get into that. If you don't want to buy the upgrade and you'd rather print your own PCCF parts for an enclosure, you are of course entirely welcome to. I think the parts are available, or they should be. I haven't looked. I have to assume that these parts are also stiffer, so they will allow the printer to run a tiny bit faster. And that's why they've been chosen for this kit. Otherwise, this part is questionable for anyone without an enclosure, but still very much worth doing because it doesn't take much time. The next bit is the LCD, but it's not the LCD because it's actually the LCD surround. You are keeping and using your old LCD. This surround and the encoder knob are now injection molded. They look neater, but I've seen some people describe them as looking cheaper. I guess that's because injection molded generally is a cheaper process. This seems to be, unless I'm missing something, an entirely cosmetic difference. It does add a back panel to the screen where you could previously stick your finger up there and touch the PCB if you really wanted to, but otherwise it's not much different. I did find this to be one of the trickiest parts of my upgrade, but the reason why it wasn't the trickiest part I'll explain in the next bit. The next bit being the Nextruder bit. If you have been around the channel for more than 5 minutes, then you'll know that I upgraded my Mark IV to the MMU version, and part of that upgrade, of course you wouldn't know that because I rage deleted the build footage, was to upgrade the plastic parts of the internals of the extruder part of said Nextruder. I do still have the footage of me changing the parts in the Nextruder, but for the sake of continuity and laziness I won't be digging through to try to find them. Let's just pretend I really did delete them. It's actually quite involved as a process, and I was somewhat glad not to have to repeat that or undo any of the changes I'd done for the MMU. You have to swap out various levers and stuff. The reason you had to do this on the MMU was to improve reliability of the hundreds of filament changes that you needed to do as part of the colour changing process. So it's good and interesting to see this rolled into the upgrade, and of course this means if you do decide to add an MMU later, you don't have to repeat this process, presumably. From there, you still have to remove the entire Nextruder from the mount though, and this involves unfeeding the wires, all the wires, or at least it feels like it, removing the side swingy fan door thing and replacing it with an interesting replacement door, adding the bracket that holds the new giant fan, which seems to be the centerpiece of the Mark IV's now, and of course adding said fan to the front. And of course adding said googly eyes to said fan. Tragically, the googly eyes just don't seem to adhere well to this kind of plastic for some reason. I have raised this as an issue and it does look like this will be addressed, so for the time being we do have a workaround. Then the last thing to do is to put the new HF nozzle in. If you have an MMU, then I believe this won't work well with it, or I don't think so, maybe it does, but I'm running my MMU upgraded Prusa in non-MMU mode, which basically means I took the MMU off and I'm just using it as a Mark IV. So I'm going to fit the HF nozzle. It's a CHT nozzle. If you don't know what that means, it's got 3 channels in it. CHT is a brand name by Bondtech. HF means high flow. It's supposed to improve the flow rate significantly, and it generally does. It also makes for the weirdest ends when you retract the filament out. The rest of the upgrade is concerning connectivity, and that consists of a new Wi-Fi module. The old one is actually an ESP32S thingy, which will work on a Prusa Mini. It's actually an off-the-shelf module. The new Wi-Fi module is new. It has a plug on it, and I think that's for the new GPIO board that they've talked about. I don't have it. I don't know if it's out yet. If you want to see what this new board can do, then leave a comment and I'll try to judge the interest. You also get an NFC module, which has a really hard to plug in cable. It's industry standard, that fitting. You see it in a lot of places. I'm just useless at this kind of thing. It's really fiddly though. Be careful with this bit. There is also a new Prusa app. If you want to use it, you absolutely don't have to use it. You can actually use the Prusa Connect website on your mobile if you would rather do that, which is generally what I do. While we're looking at PCBs, let's talk about getting your own made. If you wanted something like this, then unlike Prusa, you probably don't have your own PCB machine. Yes, they do have one. So instead, you can get professional PCBs made for a low cost in small quantities using today's sponsor PCBWay. PCBWay can manufacture PCBs in all sorts of colours with whatever you want on them. Simply design your board in the software of your choice, export it, and use the quick order page to get your PCBs made and sent to you efficiently and quickly. PCBWay also make sheet metal, CNC and 3D printed parts in a whole ton of different materials, which you can see on their order pages, which all have helpful links and tips to guide you through the order process. Check them out in the link in the description, where there's also a first time user coupon. Thank you PCBWay for sponsoring this episode. Now back to the Mark IV's. So that's, I think, the upgrade done. Now for the moment of truth. Luckily for a change, I planned this video before I started filming it, so I ran a whole bunch of test prints on the Mark IV before I did anything to it, and then I ran them again on the Mark IV's, because undoing all these changes would have been quite annoying. Is there a difference between the printed parts? I'll let you try and figure out which is which. It's quiz time. I think you could probably get at least some of those, but feel free to brag about how many you did or didn't get in the comments. We can't prove otherwise, so why not? I'm going to say that the difference in cooling is certainly observable in some cases. The thing is, the Mark IV didn't have a huge issue with cooling in the first place. I know you might gasp at that statement, but no, at the speeds it printed at in the profiles, with the tuning that the profiles had, it would turn out okay parts, because they tuned it to do so. As you can see, you can only really make it stumble in places like so, which is an intentional test to make this problem happen. This is a test to try to make cooling fail. There's a link in the description to this test part, by the way. Even with most of these test parts I got off printables, I couldn't see a huge difference. This spring looked promising, but it printed too well, so I had to make my own version with a more tortuous pitch angle. I stuck this on Patreon. You can go try it if you want to, and please do. You can get it by using a free Patreon account too. I'll put it on printables as well in due course. I wanted to see how it printed on other people's machines, and yeah, Bambu, not sure what's going on there, but by and large most printers seem to have a decent go at printing this, but I think it's fair to say that the Mark IV and the Mark IV's both actually did at least as well as the rest, so that's quite good, that's quite promising. I suspect this is actually as much a profile tuning thing as it is anything else, but isn't that part of the Prusa package? Tuned profiles. The whole point is that they support their machines better than anyone else does, and they make the slicer, and that's kind of how it works. You generally expect the profiles to be better tuned. So let's talk about the noise. With a bigger and more foreboding looking fan on the Mark IV's, you would expect it to be more noisy. However, this in my test seems not to be the case. The raw noise level seemed about the same, although to the ear it sounded notably different in frequency, i.e. lower. Finally, I should probably also address print speed. I did do some of the tests with the same G-code before and after, meaning I'm printing on the Mark IV's with the Mark IV's print profile, and I found no huge difference between doing that and the new Mark IV's profiles. You see, the Mark IV's has marginally faster print speeds, so what that means is that we are seeing an improvement over the original model. Being able to print slightly faster while retaining or improving quality is obviously desirable, and that does seem to be what I've seen in my tests. So what does this all mean in terms of whether the upgrades are worth it? I think given the price of $99 plus whatever taxes and shipping, it's hard to argue against. The time that it will take to perform the upgrade seems more relevant a discussion than the price itself. I had to film the whole thing, which probably triples the time taken, perhaps more, and I think I managed it inside of about 4 hours, so it's not that involved. Maybe add another hour for the extruder stuff that I didn't have to do because of the MMU, and that gives you an idea of how long this will take if you work steadily and don't rush, which you shouldn't. Let me know in the comments whether you think this is a no-brainer upgrade or whether you think it's not worth it, or you can always be that commenter who brings buying a Bambu into the conversation even though nobody's asking. Someone will, it might as well be you. Anyway, I think that's everything. I will see you next time with something. I think we have a weird filament to look at. We'll see, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you for watching.